All right, everybody. Hey, Doug here. I'm doing a live feed of the podcast that I'm creating for the TikTok Take with Doug Padgett, my podcast. And this is on Donald Trump being elected the President of the United States on Tuesday. It's now Friday. After the Tuesday when the world ended. Here's what I'm going to do. I've written down a number of thoughts that I want to have for the podcast, and I'm broadcasting these live to you. There's going to be two parts to this. Part one is where I see us right now, the trouble I think that we're in, the situation that we find ourselves in. I'll share my own anxieties about that. Part two, which will be on a separate live feed but on the same podcast, will include how do we move forward. And I think there's 5 alternatives for what could happen with a Trump presidency. So I found this very helpful to be thinking these things through, and I'll just tell you that I think it's really bad. I am not a Trump supporter. I opposed his presidency. I oppose it today. I do think there are 5 alternatives, though, and we can talk about those here in a minute. I will also say that I can't stop thinking about the ramifications of this. Like many of you, I'm finding myself in a situation where there are hardly 20 minutes that go by where I'm not saying to myself regularly, stop thinking about this. Almost everything I'm doing, the way my friend Tom Olson put it is, he said he lost his job once in his life as an adult, and every moment that he woke up in his bed or driving in a car and thought of it, the first thought that came to his mind was, I lost my job. That's how I feel about this. Almost everything I do, I opened the refrigerator last night to pull some food out, or yesterday morning to make a smoothie. As I'm reaching for the yogurt, I'm like, should I have the maple yogurt or should I have the plain yogurt? But Donald Trump is the president. I don't know which. Like, it is that deep inside of me. I can't stop thinking about it. And I've wondered why that is. Why has this struck me so deeply? One of the reasons, I think, is I was a huge Hillary supporter. I've been a Hillary supporter since 2008. I was heart sunk when she didn't get the nomination in 2008. I was for her. I like her as a person. I wanted her to be the president. I wanted a woman to be the president. I thought that was really important. I wanted a continuation of the Obama presidency and policies and ideas. I didn't want Donald Trump, all of those things together. And I'm like, is this all it is? Like, am I just bitter because it didn't go my way? Checking myself on that. I don't think so. I think it's more than that. I feel like it's just wrong on every front that Donald Trump is the president. I don't think he's competent. I can't even sometimes get myself to say Donald Trump is the president of the United States without feeling the need to sort of laugh it off. Like, that can't be real. Now, look, I understand that this is real trauma for me, and I'm not underplaying other kinds of trauma, but it really is experiencing to me as some kind of trauma. All of the classic signs of denial and anger and bargaining and depression and then finally acceptance, they all are swirling around. And I know that grief doesn't go in that order, but these are experiences that people have. And I'm experiencing all of them. There are times where I just feel like this can't be true. And sometimes I want to go check the vote count, or I want some people to try to pull off some miracle to stop the Electoral College. Like, I'm in that level of denial about this. I find myself angry at our country. I'm driving down the road and looking at people and thinking, were you the ones that voted for him? That's no way to live. I find myself angry at the Hillary campaign that I was such a supporter of, and I'm naming the names of campaign managers and campaign chairmen, and if she knew that she had such low approval ratings and couldn't get the vote out and was going to be so far below the Obama numbers, why didn't they? I mean, I'm just all over the place, and I'm trying to bargain somehow that, well, maybe there's a way that this could change, and depression and sadness and just anxiety seem to be the most common. So maybe you're feeling that way too. And I'll just say that that's where I am right now. Now, some of you might be listening to this days later, and you've worked through these issues and have come around the corner on this. Okay, there's a couple of things that I'm trying to keep in mind, and maybe this would be helpful for you to keep in mind as well. The way I feel about Donald Trump, I recognize that a number of other people have felt this way about other presidents. They have felt this way about Johnson when he became the president after the assassination of Kennedy. There were those who felt this way when Gerald Ford had to become the president after the resignation of Richard Nixon. There are people who felt this way about Richard Nixon. There are people who felt this way about Ronald Reagan. There are certainly people who felt this way about Jimmy Carter. There are people who felt this way about George Bush. There are people who felt this way about Barack Obama. Like, I know people who thought these things about all of those presidents, and I keep saying to myself, but we made it. We made it through. That there were all of these ways that the presidents were mocked, that Gerald Ford was a clown, that Ronald Reagan was an actor, that George Bush was the village idiot that got lost, that Jimmy Carter was a peanut farmer from Georgia, that Barack Obama was a community organizer and he didn't have any qualifications at all. What had he ever done in his life? I know people that hold those views, and they hold those views very strongly. Now, I happen to think that even with all of that, Donald Trump is out of scope of these. It's hard for me to imagine that he's going to be anywhere close to the competency of these presidents. But I don't know. Maybe. Maybe there's a chance. Maybe there's a possibility. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I need to get out publicly a little bit of my grief. You know, Hillary Clinton has this famous ad where she's with a young child who's worried about, I think it was immigration or maybe her mom's job. And Hillary pulls a little girl close and says to her, "Let me do the worrying about those big things. You live your life. Let me do the worrying." That's how some of us want our president to be. Like, there are things that our president's going to take care of. There's things that are in the president's to-do list. There's things that fit there. And we elect the people who are going to take care of those things. I wonder if where we are is that we can't say that any longer, that maybe we can't outsource the "it's going to be okay" to the president, like some of us have done over the last 8 years. Barack Obama will take care of this. Maybe it is that we have to say we have to help him. We have to make sure this is not a failed presidency. A failed presidency would be bad for the world. It would be bad for the most vulnerable in our country and around the world. It would be bad for those who are doing well. It would be bad for those who are barely hanging on. It would be bad for everyone. We have a system where the presidency matters. And to all the people who say, you know, the president doesn't really do that much, that's just simply not true. The president does a lot. And maybe we have to say that we have to help this president to be successful. This is, I think, how Barack Obama put it yesterday. I've had a hard time listening to any news. I've kept it all off. I can't look at a newspaper. I can't look at a news feed. I haven't even been on Facebook. I just don't want to see anything. I am in that place of just denial. But I heard someone tell me that Barack Obama said to President-elect Trump, "We all need you to succeed." And I've also heard that perhaps he's going to take it seriously, but I don't want to jump ahead to the next. But let me just say a few things about Trump. People vote for president for a lot of reasons. So there are people who voted for Donald Trump, and a lot of them. In the states where it mattered, more people than voted for Hillary. Around the country, a statistical tie. Maybe at the end of all the counting, he will even have won the popular vote. But there are more people in the states where we know that it matters, where you can't just run up the numbers like in some of the big states, New York and California and so on. But in the states where it mattered, more people voted for him than for her. I don't understand that. I don't know how that's possible. I keep thinking about the third party, and I keep having really bad thoughts about the third party. I keep thinking about the people who said things like, well, I just not all that enthused, so I'm going to go for my enthusiasm. And they use their vote as personal expression and not as an instrument of democracy. And it makes me crazy. Future podcasts, I'll maybe talk about some of that. But people voted for Donald Trump for many reasons. And I want to believe that of the 52 or 54 million people that voted for him, it's not because they're racist. It's not because they're misogynist. It's not because they're sexist. It's not because they're xenophobic. It's not because they really want to see some kind of an alternative right, white nationalist thing take off in this country. Now, I'm telling myself that that's the case. There's deep fear in me that there's too many people with those views, or that those views are going to carry too much power in our society going forward. I don't want that to be the reason. I want there to be people who voted for all kinds of reasons. And I worry that people like me are not going to take that seriously. The other reasons that people voted for Donald Trump. Somehow that people told themselves that maybe someone without experience, someone from a different sector could be the president. I don't know. Maybe they're right. I mean, here's the thing. Donald Trump was right about so many things that I said to myself, there's no way he could be right about these things. I still tell myself he couldn't have been right about these things. Now, maybe I'm in denial, or maybe there's something else going on, that he was right about these things, that people really would vote for him over her, that people really would set aside all these things that he would do because they wanted this kind of change, that people really did live in the comfort and security of all the goodness that has been in our presidency for the last 8 years, in my view, and they just said, well, you know what, maybe we can get by without it. Maybe we don't need that thing. Now, I fear that it's somebody remodeling their own home and they pulled out a load-bearing wall that they actually needed, and they just wanted to have a bigger kitchen, and so they ripped out this wall, and their ceiling is going to collapse, and the roof is going to fall in, and their house is going to be destroyed. I worry that that's the case, but I don't know. Maybe it's not. I worry about what kind of country wouldn't hear the things he said and say that just disqualifies you. It just disqualifies you. I don't understand that. I'm a big proponent of the wisdom of the crowds. I like this book called with a subtitle, What Happens When the Smartest People in the Room Are the Room. I really do believe that the more we pool our collective thinking, the better off we are, that we don't outsource the goodness of the world or smarts or intelligence or the future to elites. Now, I fear that what happened here is that we didn't have everyone in the room, that people sat out the election, that they didn't put their voice in, or maybe it's the other way. Maybe there's some wisdom in all of this that we didn't understand. Now, a few thoughts on Hillary. It seemed to me she did everything right in that campaign. Now, I was arguing with a friend the other night that she obviously didn't. I was making the point. She obviously didn't because she lost so badly. I mean, she got swamped in the Electoral College. It was so bad. So something didn't happen. And maybe it was sexism. I think that's it. I really think people just couldn't vote for a woman. But others tell me no, she's like a layer cake of problems. For some it was sexism. For some it was her personality. For some it was her politics. For some it was her way of surrounding herself in some insular, paranoid group of people that wouldn't let the truth get in. For other people, they just thought she had too much trouble and baggage. For some people, they didn't want there to be another Clinton. They didn't like this idea of a Bush and a Bush and a Clinton and a Clinton. We don't want dynasties. Maybe all of that pooled together could be true. I worry about the Democratic Party. As a Democrat, I worry about it. It's going to collapse under its own weight. And I've realized something. The Democratic Party will not hold together around ideas. It needs to be a party led by leaders, by people. People get around those that they're passionate about. No matter what the ideas, obviously the ideas that she has were the Democratic ideas. They were Barack Obama's ideas. She wanted to continue those, but people didn't say it was enough for the ideas. They wanted the right leader. That's something that has to be learned. It's a lesson that really does have to be learned. So I wonder, who are we that we would elect Donald Trump? Maybe in the long run, we're going to see there was some great wisdom. Maybe in the long run, there's something good that comes out of all of this. Super hard for me to see it right now. But I do think there are 5 alternatives for how this could go. I'm going to stop and restart the stream right now so that those of you who just want to listen to that part and don't want to listen to my comments on how difficult I feel that it is, on the live stream, we'll be back in a moment with the 5 alternatives for moving forward, 5 alternative realities that could come into play. Maybe one of these, I think one of these 5 is going to be the case. I think one of these 5 will be what's going to happen in a Trump presidency. And I have real hope for those. And then a few thoughts on the ways that we can move forward. So thanks for being part of the stream. And if you're on the podcast, just hold tight through this little break, and we'll be right back. This is the TikTok Take with Doug Padgett.